belief, and everything he's done is based on the belief that it's curiosity that motivates us. And I think you saw that today. We were all curious about what was going to happen and how would the missions work and could we do it. And that curiosity sparks learning. His TED Talk was called 3 Ways to Spark Learning. And so I am privileged and delighted to introduce Dr. Ramsey Musallam.
Thank you. Thank you. And you guys started school last week?
Yep.
Okay. So you know that feeling when you just got off work and you want a beer, a glass of wine really bad? That's me right now, and I just am standing in front of all of you drinking. So that's great. Thank you very much.
Water? I have water.
I have some water right here.
That's not what he wants.
It's okay. I can do. But yeah, today was my second day back in the classroom at Sacred Heart Cathedral, or Dell, where I also work. Okay, so I teach at Sacred Heart Cathedral Prep in downtown San Francisco, and last week was our first week of school. So I want to start with some disclosures. We had that first week before school where we had like registration and all kinds of stuff we could have done on email that we did in person. But the school did bring in a speaker, okay, and I will not disclose the name of the speaker, but the talk left a lot of us there very frustrated and not feeling too excited about the year, okay? And I'm just being honest with you about this. I feel like I should be honest with you about it. And it was supposed to be about technology in the classroom, and it left us feeling a little intimidated, myself included. So I want to give you that talk as kind of the anti-talk at the beginning. Can I do that? Okay, so it began with a long creative title, followed by all the person's degrees, okay? After that, and then their Twitter handle, their email, their blog, their Facebook, their LinkedIn, okay? And then a picture like this, right? And then a picture like this, and then a picture like this, and then an intriguing question. Notice any similarities, right, between all the desks in a row. And I'm like, my desks are in a row. What am I going to do, right? And then I'm like, I ran to my classroom, tried to put them in groups, right? And then notice any similarities, and then threw out a little think, pair, share to make us know that they were in the classroom at one point. And then a picture of some kids working on iPads kind of independently, and then good or bad. So we started thinking about technology. Oh, is that good or bad? And then another thing, pair, share. Right? And then this was the awesome part. They threw out this timer. This is the exact timer. And I'm like, all right, I'm in. So I immediately went to Google and I tried to find that timer, right? So I was like, that is a sweet timer in my classroom. And then I downloaded my favorite little trick where you can put a little SS in front of the YouTube, and then you can steal the video right away. So now I'm using that timer in my classroom. Just literally go to YouTube and go 3-minute timer. So this is happening while he's talking. I'm like, yeah, I'm into it. And then he's like, it's not about the technology, it's about the pedagogy. And I'm like, right? And then reminded me that it was him who said that. So I was just like, this is ridiculous because, and then throughout this thing that they stole off Twitter, technology won't replace teachers, but teachers who use technology will probably replace those who don't. And now I'm feeling really bad about myself because I just said it's not about the technology, but then they threw some Sir Ken Robinson at the end, right? So we're all feeling really good about things, and we're thinking about creativity, but I thought we were talking about educational, and then we got the thank you and the title again. So that was the talk. My agenda for today, here's my email, there's my Twitter. Follow me, please. I put everything for today's talk on this site. So if you go to cyclesoflearning.com/Napa, you'll get these slides, or PDF slides. I actually haven't uploaded the slides yet in the spirit of, the agent of influence, of the mystery. I want to gradually release the talk to you, so I'll upload the slides when it's over. But throughout the talk, you're going to see some links to some quotes, some research for sure, and some other videos, and those are all linked there as well. So if you want to dig deeper into the talk, you can right there. But what I think the most important thing that we could do early in the year like this is really negotiate the tension between two things that I think are really often not teased out. The program I graduated from at USF was learning and instruction, right? Or teaching and learning. And we often don't tease out the definition of those two. We think of them as one and the same. But if you look at teaching, it's the ideas or principles taught by an authority, okay? all of us, obviously, right? Or learning, the acquisition of knowledge or skills through experience, study, or being taught, right? And I think we're trying to find where those two things overlap perfectly. Where does teaching and learning? And I think it's really simple, but really, I think that's our call. My hero, the late author David Foster Wallace, says something about this which I think defines it much better. Learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. It means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to and choose how you construct meaning from experience. Because if you cannot exercise this kind of choice in adult life, you will be totally hosed, right? So Wallace was from Illinois, not from Canada. But I think that that's really what we're all trying not to do. Like, I'm trying not to get hosed by my students who I just met yesterday, right? Completely. And they can sniff us out for a fake. Like, when we're not playing to our strengths, when I'm trying to do a QR code museum tour, when that is just not who I am as a teacher in the classroom, I just can't muster up the authenticity to do that, or I'm somebody that should be doing that, and I'm not, the kids can really smell it out well. So I love this quote from Parker Palmer because I think it really reminds us that teaching is a real personal vocation. Like it's like parenting, right? It's a personal thing that we do publicly. And then we have all these like judgmental 17-year-olds talking about us on Rate My Teacher, and we're trying to like pretend like that doesn't exist, right? And it's really tricky. So I think that that's really important. So who am I? And I want to share that with you, and why am I lucky enough to be here? These are my two daughters. On the left, that's Riley, and that's Emmylou, Academy of Sciences, okay? $30 a piece to get in, and then we got in, and did some science. And I really got tired of Pinkalicious and Ladybug Girl and all the other books that we were reading at night. So I decided about 2 months ago that I was going to do just a quick little science experiment with my kids before bed every night, instead of a book. So some silly little things, you know, sometimes you can be amazed what can entertain a 6-year-old, right? It's just silly little things. But I started recording videos of them doing them, and I'm posting them on my blog, and it's called Bedtime Science. I think there's 19 of them now. Because I'm a California educator, I have to align everything with a standard. So here's one that we did last week. This is any AP chemistry teachers. This is from the revised College Board objectives, learning objective 2.4. The student is able to use the kinetic molecular theory and concepts of intermolecular forces to make predictions about gases. All right. So here's Riley we just moved to Petaluma, so this is in our new backyard.
Don't move.
Why do you make me do this?
And I'm like, learning objective 2.4 is why I made you do this, Riley. I apologize about the Hugh Hefner like PJs. She wears them like every night. And these are my two newborn twin boys, 5 months old. Yes, I have 4 kids. Don't get intimidated. Like anybody I tell, they freak out when I tell them right away. Like they get nervous for me. But that's Samuel on the left, and that's Jasper on the right. So who knows what's up for them in the coming years. But I really love teaching chemistry. It's really all I know how to teach. It's all I really want to teach. I want to die teaching chemistry. I love it. I probably will die because of teaching chemistry. So the problem with teaching chemistry in the last year or so is I had to compete with this guy. And it's really, I mean, there's a lot of issues. I mean, I don't even own a white pair of underwear. I wear boxers. But a major problem is stuff like this. I mean, this was from the pilot, right? Like, look at Walt. He's got no glasses on. Kids haven't signed a safety contract. They're not wearing glasses. It's first day of class. He's got some like really complicated electron configuration stuff on the wall, which happens to be correct, which I was very impressed with. That this was like good science. But how do I compete with this kind of stuff? I mean, it's ridiculous. I have no idea how to cook meth, nor do I want to know how to cook meth. But the thing that's really great about chemistry, teaching chemistry, is it's absolutely everywhere. You see it everywhere. It is everything. I mean, I tell kids they're a walking cheat sheet, which really doesn't add any comfort to them. But it's totally everywhere. Like this clip from Indiana Jones, like you see it in old movies all the time. I love this clip, and it's great for teaching density to students. The main problem, though, about this clip, as you probably see, is Indiana's PhD in archaeology did not involve the concept that not all things that are the same size have the same weight, right? And if you do the calculation with the assumption that's gold, it should be about 8 times as big. That should be the bag of sand. So you see it all the time. Bless his heart, Colbert. I was about to teach a lesson on states of matter to my wife's 5th grade class when we had a day off, and this came on, and he defined, I forgot the difference between a solid, liquid, and gas, and Colbert defined it for me.
The question remains, was Romney's speech effective?
I thought that speech was good enough.
It was a workmanlike job, but it certainly got the job done. This was a solid speech.
A very solid, and dare I say, business-like speech.
It was a solid speech. A solid speech. He did a pretty solid job. Solid guy.
Yes. We can all agree that Mitt Romney is a solid. Matter cannot pass through him. And he does not conform to the shape of his container.
It never gets old, right? And literally, we were watching this, and my wife's like, "Go do it." She knew that I was going to go to Netflix, screencast it, and like she was. And I had to do this one for my daughter. She's obsessed with Taylor Swift. I love Taylor Swift, by the way. She's awesome. But I had to do this one because it's great when we're talking about lab safety. So in class today, actually, my lesson was the kids deconstructing this video for all the things wrong with it. So. So first, there's a lot of issues. First, there's Drew, right? So Drew is wearing physics goggles, not chemistry goggles, and his goggles aren't on his head. But worse than that is Taylor. Not only is she holding hydrochloric acid in her hand right there, which is that demonstration, she has the solid in the graduated cylinder. Why would you put the solid in the graduated cylinder? That's just not safe. But we're not here to talk about technology. We're here to talk, chemistry. We're here to talk about educational technology, ed tech. So I want to give you some reflections on my journey in and out and back into and with ed tech as a partner in the classroom. Really, and Dr. Redmond can attest to this, when I really started getting excited about educational technologies when I saw my first Khan Academy video, right? And I started to think about the use of video in the classroom differently. I started to think about it from a cognitive perspective, not just like, oh my gosh, I have a smart board, we can touch things and be tactile, or oh my gosh, I can post homework on Blackboard. It was, I can now do things with my students' cognition that I couldn't before, like not lecturing in class and that kind of stuff, right? So I started to think about it differently, and I started to make my own videos, and I started to get really into this, and eventually led to some of the research that I worked on in graduate school. But I want to challenge that notion a little bit and push us now as we look forward and we have those tools that we didn't have before in a different direction, and challenge you guys to think about it beyond that. So I'm going to play you a couple clips from Khan's TED Talk in 2008, and we're going to deconstruct a couple of pieces of it and then think about them differently. So here's the first clip.
Once you get over the backhanded nature of that, there was actually something very profound there. They were saying that they preferred the automated version of their cousin to their cousin. At first it's very unintuitive, but when you actually think about it from their point of view, it makes a ton of sense. You have this situation where now they can pause and repeat their cousin.
So this whole idea of pausing, people started talking about this amazing idea, like if you give your kids things on video, they can pause and they can repeat it and they can watch it when they want. But there's already been research done on this by Richard Mayer at UC Santa Barbara, and there's certain design principles that he had already been looking at and studying. One, which Khan kind of just said naturally, is the segmenting principle, that it's easier when we put information in working segments that are chunked into pieces. It's more gentle on their cognition. And this idea of personalization. So the fact that it was his voice is going to decrease what's called the extraneous cognitive load. So it's going to feel like the information is entering your brain in a think smoother, like in a little bit of an easier way. We can look at it this way if we think of the brain as two parts. The first part is where you're actively working on information, and the second part is where that information gets processed. Okay? And you think of those 4 boxes as pieces of information. Really, they can go in 2 ways, your eyes or your ears. And what Khan is saying is by chunking it up and by personalizing it, those pieces just feel like they're entering easier. Okay? I mean, this is not good science, what I'm showing you right here, but it should model the idea that that's really what he's talking about. I didn't start thinking about it this way, and it was really exciting to think about it this way until that moment. And then there's another one that's actually more popular now and a little, and we're going to challenge even more.
But I didn't think it would be something that would somehow penetrate the classroom. But then I started getting letters from teachers. And the teachers would write saying, we've used your videos to flip the classroom. You've given the lectures. So now what we do, and this could actually happen in every classroom in America tomorrow, what I do is I assign the lectures for homework, and what used to be homework, I now have the students doing in the classroom. And I want to pause here for...
So what kind of blew me away about this moment right here was the applause that he got immediately at that moment, right? And I don't know, if you think about it, he's not saying something that profound. He's just saying that we're going to lecture in a different location. But I kind of feel like it's coming from this gut hatred of homework that people have, like this fear, like, oh my gosh, my class is a homework review class. That's what it is. It's a homework review class. And I spend so much time figuring out how am I going to grade homework, and is the technology now going to finally let me grade homework? Like all this stuff about homework, right? So everyone's eyes kind of perked up, oh, let's think about it differently. But what I want to challenge is that applause, okay? Who's applauding for the right reasons and who might be applauding for what I think are the wrong reasons? But this idea of flipping the classroom comes out of Mayer as well, and it's this idea of the pre-training principle. If you see some information and you process it up, your phone number becomes one thing, not 7 digits, and the next time you see that information, it feels a little bit easier. And that idea is something that had already been talked about. Khan gave me a window into learning about that, and that was a very exciting thing for me. So let's model what it feels like to have learned information, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flash in front of you right now a bunch of dots. I'm going to flash it for like a half a second. And your job is to count all the dots in a half a second. And I bet you all can get it. Okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3. How many dots? 25 dots, right? You didn't count all 25 dots. There are 5 groups of 5 right there. So, the process of learning is basically the process of those 25 dots becoming those 5 chunks. And that idea really started to excite me. I wrote my dissertation on it in college. And when that was over in 2010, Google Docs started to come alive, and I started to get excited about especially Google Forms as a piece of technology. It's like the ninja of ed tech. I swear to you, I have like 100 Google Forms in one folder, I think. So I decided, what I'd do with the end of that year, the class of 2010 was the year that I did my research on. So they were the ones that I did the IRB with and everything. I wanted to see what they thought. Like, I never lectured once in this entire class. Every single lecture was online. I did like 50 labs. Almost every day we did something hands-on. The kids loved it. They watched the videos as I thought, right? So I did something really stupid, okay? I got anonymous feedback from them about the year, and because I wanted to include this in a paper that I'd eventually write up, turned out to be about why it wasn't a good study based on this feedback. So if you really want to develop some like low-grade alcoholism, like get anonymous feedback from your students. It's bad. It's hard stuff to look at, okay? But I swear to you, it rings me. So what you're about to look at are the first 4 Google Form entries from the morning class on 2010, okay? Screenshots of them. So there's the form, AP Chemistry Honest Feedback Form. I loved watching you blow stuff up, but I still don't have a clue what stoichiometry is. Okay, 8:47 a.m. May 2nd. 8:49, even though I'm not planning on studying science at all in college, your class was the only one I look forward to this year. Okay? So you love the way a 17-year-old can tease out the good. and bad, right? They're beautifully honest about things. It seemed to be perfectly honest that you were experimenting on us. And I'm like, yeah, you signed the IRB form, dude, all right? I hate it when the problem looks different on a test. Stop trying to be all creative and stuff. Because I tried to make the test harder because I thought they had more time in class to learn conceptually with me. Wasn't the case. But the last one is the best one, and this one is the one that still makes me cry a little bit. Not sure what this stuff means, but I got an A, so I guess I do. I consider you a friend. I mean, I consider you a friend. It's so beautiful, right? Now, if I asked for the kid's name, that I consider you a friend would have guided the whole comment. I bet you anything, okay? So this person tore down my ability to transfer knowledge, my ability to assess, and my ability to form appropriate relationships with my students in one sentence, right? So Dr. Apido at USF, who is my chair on this, I came to her with this information. I was like, this is crazy. I got really strong statistical significance, but my AP scores this year were lower than they've ever been, and the feedback I got from these students wasn't good, right? Something's up. I don't want to continue on this path. So she encouraged me to go into my theoretical rationale at the time, which any good advisor would encourage you to go right back to your theoretical rationale. Like, are the theories that are underlying your hypotheses even valid? Like, are these valid? So this all comes out of John Sweller's cognitive load theory. And I stumbled across a video that Derek Mueller, I don't know if you're familiar with Derek Mueller of Veritasium, physics website, and the show Uranium. He was interviewing Sweller for his own dissertation work at the same time. And which used cognitive load theory, okay? Now he happened to live in Australia where he lived. But he's interviewing him, and what Sweller says just blew me away. He literally answered my question, okay? So I want you to listen to it, see if you can figure out what he said.
Cognitive load theory works on the assumption that the students are fully engaged, fully motivated, that their attention is being directed. Cognitive load theory has nothing to say about a student who's staring out the window and not listening.
But of course that is frequent in our
It is frequent, and when I say cognitive load theory has nothing to say about it, I'm not saying it's unimportant.
Yeah. It's not part of the theory.
It's just not part of the theory. There are many ways of ensuring that students are motivated and that their cognitive resources are being fully devoted to the task. Once those cognitive resources are fully devoted to the task, cognitive load theory then says, okay, well, this is how you ought to organise the task. The issue of how do you get students to be fully directed, fully concerned with the task and not concerned about the last night's party, that's for other theories. Which doesn't mean it's unimportant, it's critically important.
That's for other theories, right? I'm like, oh man, right? So what does it look like then, right? The next step was, okay, what does it look like when you have people that are concerned with the task? Because anybody here who knows statistics with research methods, my study was an ANCOVA, right? So what that means was the groups at the beginning were not the same. And I had to make them the same. And they were not the same because they were human beings who aren't the same, right? They weren't the same because they didn't have the same prior knowledge, because they weren't supposed to, you know. And my measurement to get at their prior knowledge was good. I felt like that was the piece. I should have stopped with that measurement, and that should have taken me in another direction. So what's it look like when someone's really concerned with the task? I mean, it kind of looks like Luke and Yoda, right? And the reason I'm picking these ones is these are people that are not only doing tasks, they're doing tasks that are very low Bloom's taxonomy, okay? Like, look at Yoda, I mean Luke, he's like lifting rocks, right? You know, doing handstands. I mean, it might be hard, but that's not necessarily something that's applying his skill to being a Jedi, or maybe it is, who knows? But he's willingly doing the lower Blooms. This is a great one, Will at Good Will Hunting. It doesn't look necessarily that happy, right? But he's definitely concerned with the task. He keeps going back to Sean, even though Sean is digging into the depths of who he is as a person. And probably the best example of lower blooms is Daniel's son, right? Wax on, wax off. If you looked up lower Bloom's taxonomy in the dictionary, you'll see this. I mean, but the thing is, he shows up there and does it. And why is he engaging in it? And I can promise you, he's not engaging in it just because it's in a video. And he doesn't have to do it in class, right? He's engaging it for a different reason. Not because it's segmented, not because he can replay Miyagi or anything. He's engaging in the lower blooms for a different reason. So what do all these teachers have in common? I won't make you think pair share about it, okay? But I think what they have in common is something that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And it takes a really OCD person like myself to figure out what they have in common. What I did is I went to where each person shows up in the movie, okay? So this is the first scene where Sean shows up in Good Will Hunting. Bunker Hill Junior College, Jared Lambeau waiting at the door to go talk to his best friend about trying to get Will to go to counseling, okay? Best Actor, 1996, Best Actor Award, Supporting Actor. He does not show up in the movie until 41 minutes into the movie. 41, almost a third of the way into the movie, probably the most important character in the movie shows up. And you don't even know it. You don't even think about it when the movie's over. You think about Good Will Hunting, you think about Robin Williams, right? And he doesn't show up until 41. So that says something about teaching. And it really, I mean, it's kind of a cheap trick, but if we look at the hero's journey, which all of these things I think are kind of based on, I mean, the anti-hero, if you look at Walt, but the helper, it shows up in the middle. The helper is not at the beginning. The helper is in the middle. The mentor is not at the beginning. So we then invent things like the learning cycle and inquiry-based learning, and we invent all these things to describe a cycle that's already existed, that we already know what is engaging. For example, what's the most popular inquiry learning cycle? The 5E learning cycle, probably. So if you look at the 5E learning cycle, it's the hero's journey. That's all it is. There's where the mentor is. That's where the explanation shows up, okay? And then we move on to transformation or elaboration. We're just modeling something that we know already works, okay? And that's what I believe, which is really fun to think about it that way. So if you look at transformation, it's really interesting, especially in The Karate Kid. Like, we know the famous ending of The Karate Kid, right? Miyagi, if anybody remembers this movie, I apologize if you're not like kids of the 80s, okay? Miyagi never directly taught Daniel's son that move. He brought him to the beach to teach him how to balance on a boat, and then he went and practiced it himself. But maybe he knew he was going to watch him. Who knows? But he didn't do a wax on, wax off to win. He did that move. So that's, to me, like the teacher facilitating the transformation of the hero. And it's a really great clip to watch at the end. I apologize. The only one I could find was in Spanish. Yeah, he didn't do like he didn't isolate the variable exactly the same way in math. He didn't balance the equation exactly the same way. He didn't do the wax on, wax off click. He transformed himself, and the instructor had everything and nothing to do with that, right? That is a very hard thing to do, that overlap of teaching and learning. And there's Elizabeth Shue, who we all had to crush on. But I think the hardest part of we'll call it the inquiry learning cycle or the hero's journey, is the very beginning, the call to adventure, which is the engagement moment. Because being required by law to go to algebra class is hardly a call to adventure. Okay? And some people would argue that it's not our responsibility to do that, and I think everyone has every right to make that argument. Okay? I'm just saying, for me, I can't make that argument because that's not where my authenticity overlaps in the classroom. Some people have this presence where it just comes. Like, they just do. Those people are artists. But they're doing something with their presence that they might not know. So this call to adventure is really, I think, the tricky part that I was not paying attention to. I was paying attention to the mentorship piece in my study. Was not paying attention to the call to adventure piece. And this comes really easy when you're young. Like, something as boring as write an expression for the force exerted by an ideal spring and for the potential energy of a stretched or compressed string. If you want to call AP physics students to adventure with this, that might be a difficult task, but it's not hard with little kids, right? So we know the rubber band babies, right? I mean, they are modeling that standard perfectly, right? Because they're supposed to. Like, they just don't have that much knowledge yet. Like, I don't know about you, but I really don't like it when it's like we rip the curiosity from kids, or like our traditional education failed us. Or it didn't. We're all here, right? The point is just how can we do it better? Like, that's just all there is. It's just how can we do it better? So these, make sense. It's easy to call little kids to adventure. Like my daughter, we went camping the other day, and she kept asking me, why is it dark outside? Why is it dark outside? Why is it dark at night? And I'm like, oh my God, you're so curious about why it's dark at night. And I wanted to be like, because the sun's over there, But then in my head, I'm like, is that why it's dark at night? So I just asked her why she thinks it's dark at night. And it was really amazing to hear her misconceptions, like that surfaced just in me asking her.
So the clouds push them. They push one at a time. So first they push the sun, and then they push it up to the sky.
And that's when it's light outside. And then what happens when it's dark outside?
Well, then the clouds push the moon up to the sky too.
Awesome.
And the sun blows away.
Awesome. How's your hair doing?
Right? So it's like, that's great. Like, these are two young kids that are supposed to, like, those misconceptions are sort of our anchors as teachers with them. But then let's look at some other California state learning standards, maybe about seasons in the lunar cycle, right? So I'm going to do a cheap teacher trick of show you some clips you probably have seen in credential school. Let's talk about now older individuals explaining similar phenomena.
I think the seasons happen because as the Earth travels around the sun, it gets nearer to the sun, which produces warmer weather, and gets farther away, which produces colder weather, and hence the seasons.
How hot it is or how cold it is at any given time of the year has to do with the closeness of the Earth to the sun during the seasonal periods.
The Earth goes around the sun, and it gets hotter when we get closer to the sun, and it gets colder when we get farther away from the sun.
All right, so not true, right? Okay. We can get into, right, everyone's like, do I know why there's seasons, right? So let's look at the lunar cycle too. Now, these were taken from a video called The Private Universe. This is Harvard graduation, 1970 something, I'm sure. Harvard professor, recent Harvard grads.
The Earth's position interferes with the reflection of the sun against the moon.
Right, so no, the Earth's position is not interfering with, but why? I mean, my daughter, literally yesterday was like, why is the sun changing shape and a moon changing shape? And I'm like, Piaget, you know exactly what you're talking about. Like, all kids ask those things, right? So the question really is, when is the misconception useful, and when does it indicate bad teaching? Right? So I would say that in those first two people, the misconception is useful, and in the last end, it might indicate bad teaching, right? Because it took every ounce of me to not Google when I got home, like, why is it actually dark at night?
In summary, if we lived in an infinite, unchanging universe, the entire sky would be as bright as the sun. But the sky is dark at night, both because the universe had a beginning, so there are stars in every direction, and more importantly, because the light from super distant stars, and the even more distant cosmic background radiation, gets redshifted away from the visible spectrum by the expansion of the universe. So we just plain can't see it. Finally, we've shed some light on why the night sky is dark, and why it isn't.
Right? So when do I do that? When does it make sense for me to transfer that information? Because it's like, I don't want my kids to Google everything. I want to teach. I like teaching. I like lecturing. It's awesome. When am I going to do it, right? So if you look at the research on curiosity, it's like a U-shaped curve. In the research article, I don't have it cited here, but it is on that link I put earlier, this whole article. So it's a U-shaped curve, and it makes a lot of sense. If you don't have any information, you're not that curious about it. If you have all the information, you're not that curious about it either. That there's this specific sweet spot where the perfect amount of information is withheld. Maybe behind a QR code, okay? Maybe behind one of these Google Cardboard things. That there are natural things that propel the hero's journey. Okay, that's fine, right? But how does that explain what we just saw up there? Well, what's a little bit more interesting is then if you put curiosity on this axis and you look at the brain when it's being curious, okay? So UC Davis did this recently, last year, and they found that when the people were pumped with high curiosity items and then shown unrelated images right after those high curiosity items, that they retained knowledge of what those unrelated images were much more than when they were shown low curiosity items. For example, they were asked a question like, what galaxy is the Earth in? Everyone would say Milky Way, and then they would show them some random image. And then they'd ask them a question like, what instrument was invented to sound like a human being singing? Okay, they'd answer it, and then they tell them the answer, a violin, and then they show them the image. And it was like crazy statistical significance. The brain was so much more active when their mind was curious, which helped their retention of the information. See what I'm saying? So if you look at this graph, the processing increases, so we can make the assumption that having not all the information makes us better learners. Okay, that the ability to walk this line makes us better learners. So I show this every talk I get. I love what J.J. Abrams says about this, right? And I think that we need to remember that all these things that these dudes already had figured out are exactly what we're talking about when we talk about engagement in the classroom.
Look at stories, you think, well, what are stories but mystery boxes? There's a fundamental question. In TV, the first act is called the teaser. It's literally the teaser. It's a big question. So you're drawn into it. And then, of course, there's another question, and it goes on and on. Look at like Star Wars. You got the droids, they meet the mysterious woman. Who's that? We don't know. Mystery box, you know. Then you meet Luke Skywalker, he gets the droid, you see the holographic image. You learn, oh, it's a message, you know, she wants to, you know, find Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's her only hope. But who the hell's Obi-Wan Kenobi? Mystery box. So then you go and he meets Ben Kenobi. Ben Kenobi is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Holy shit, you know. So it keeps us. Have you guys not seen that? It's huge. Anyway, so there's this thing with mystery boxes that I started feeling like compelled. Then there's a thing of like mystery in terms of imagination, the withholding of information. You know, doing that intentionally is much more engaging, whether it's like the shark in Jaws. If Spielberg's, you know, mechanical shark bruise had worked, it would not have been remotely as scary. You would have seen it too much. In Alien, they never really showed the alien, terrifying. Even in a movie like, you know, like a romantic comedy, The Graduate, they're having that date, remember, and they're in the car, and it's loud, and so they put the top up, and they're in there. You don't hear anything they're saying. You can't hear a word, but it's the most romantic date ever, and you love it because you don't hear it. So
I love that. You love it because you don't hear it. You know, Nate Cornell out of Williams College says difficulty builds mental muscle while ease builds only confidence. And I think that's a hard thing to remember, like while we're teaching, but I think it's really important. Like engagement and curiosity overlap very tightly, but entertainment doesn't necessarily overlap with all those things really well. So it's tricky. What's entertainment? What's engagement? If I find a video clip that might be really great for my students, like the one with Raiders of the Lost Ark, I could show them the first 20 minutes of the video. That's entertainment. Or I could steal it using save from net. I can put it into QuickTime and I can trim it down and I can find that exact moment and I can ask, what mistake did Indiana make? And that could take it down into something that takes entertainment into engagement, which is different. So as I start my year this year, I made a little lesson plan checklist for myself because I like lesson planning. So my lesson planning checklist has 3 parts. First is, am I the delayed mentor? Meaning, am I kind of following the hero's journey? Do I show up later? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes later? Or am I the first thing they experience when I walk in the classroom? You love it because you don't hear it. I think that is just really telling. The other one I kind of alluded to here, and this is the idea of publicly sharing our work, you know, building digital citizens by asking them to be digital citizens. So are their crane kicks public? So first of all, this means I'm asking them to do crane kicks, which means I'm asking them to extend their knowledge, because they want to. The second is it public? So is it, I've done this 3 ways. First, is it public if it's behind a Google Drive folder? Turned out I thought it was public, but it wasn't public because everybody's work looked exactly the same. Even though it was behind a Google Drive folder and it was organized and I felt really good about myself because it was organized, their best work was still behind that Google Drive folder. Okay? So am I asking them to present their work in something that they believe in? So this year, you know, and when I talk about presenting your work in a public space, I'm not talking about Facebook, okay? Facebook is great for some things, but I'm not talking about Facebook. I mean, I love what the late David Carr says. Facebook is a bit like a big dog galloping towards you in the park. More often than not, it's hard to tell whether he wants to play with you or eat you. Like, how many times have we contemplated deleting Facebook and then we're like, oh, I'll just delete it from my phone. And then I download it again. You know, there's that whole process we play. But I'm talking about things like TED or TEDx is a really good one. Teachers are using TED a lot in their classroom, right? Showing a lot of TED videos. Well, you can go online like we did last year at our school and you can have a TED event at your school. Anyone can, and they will approve any TEDx youth event. Trust me, they will approve anyone. I know they will. So our kids went on last year and they hosted, ran, produced 100% with 12 speakers from around the Bay Area at our school. And it was just celebrating the voices of youth in San Francisco, which ended up being a big deal because I don't know if you've been following the news at my school, but there's a lot of issues going on right now about gender and about sexuality as that plays into the church in San Francisco right now. And there's a lot of things our students are dealing with right now, which are really powerful. I mean, look at these kids. This was our planning team last year. They're not being graded for this, but they believe that TED is a place that people will watch. That's why they're looking that way. If this was something we put on at our school and wasn't TED, I don't think you'd get those stares. You know, these kids, the choir sung in it. This is Catherine Pan, who talked about archery as a metaphor for learning. This is Haley Baker from Bishop O'Dowd High School that talked about the complexities of being a light-skinned African-American student in a primarily dark-skinned neighborhood at a white school, and brought all that together, which is really powerful. Katie Manuel talked about the power of teenage girls, and we just found that this talk will be shuttled to TED.com actually, which is pretty amazing. She had over 3,000 hits right when it was done. So this year what I'm doing with my students is I'm having them just present their work on blogs instead of Google Docs. And I'm using Blogger because we're a Google Apps school and they have single sign-in. So all my kids have a Blogger account if they're a Google Apps school. So what I'm having them do is when a chapter's over, pick their best works and their best thoughts and create a blog post about that. And then I post those on Twitter, and then they feel like there's kind of like this thing. And then our goal is for their blog to come up before their Instagram profile by the end of the year. And then that'll go on their college letter rec. Much different than posting a bit.ly link to a Google Drive folder with work that they have in there. They believe the Huffington Post has changed the world. It's a blog. Like, they believe that blogs will. I think a blog is something that really has lasted. And one thing I really love about Blogger is it's got this really unique, subtle feature that most people don't know. You can actually post to your blog by email. So you can send pictures and video and text via email, and that will feed your blog. So now the kids are blogging very simply. They think email is something ubiquitous. They can do it like that, right? So they can blog that way, and we teach them how to do it. And I encourage you guys to YouTube or watch the tutorial on the site I made for you on this. Austin Kleon says, if it's not public, it doesn't exist. I think that's kind of a polarizing statement, but it's nice to think about. Like, maybe this is the wiring they're talking about that's different. I mean, how many kids take a picture and don't post it somewhere? Okay. And the last one is anonymous, is my feedback I'm getting from them anonymous, right? I'm just gonna try and do it more frequently so I don't get blown away by them. So what was really going on in 2010 though, when this happened? I mean, there must have been some other things going on because I was using a lot of technology at the time. I was using a smartboard, and then we got these bamboo tablets, which I love, right? And then we got a document camera. This is the whole time when they didn't know what the A meant, right? Then I got an Apple TV, so I was able to move around the classroom with my iPad. And then a swivel. Have you guys heard of these things called a swivel? I got one once, and now it sits in some drawer. And I had a Go Cam, and I was like gonna strap it to my head and film video. It was ridiculous. And then I was using all this cool technology. Remember the first software I started using was BrainPop. I loved BrainPop. And then Khan Academy. And then we use Schoology now at our school, and I use Canvas at the graduate level. And then Socrative to see if students know what we're doing. And then what's the one thing everyone's using now for review in class? Kahoot, right? Everyone's using Kahoot now in class. So like, what was going on? So like, we had to take a picture for the yearbook, and they said, how do you imagine yourself in the classroom? And that was the picture that I took. But that's really not how I was in the classroom. I was more like this guy in the classroom.
Wikipedia is the best thing ever. Anyone in the world can write anything they want about any subject. So you know you are getting the best possible information.
I remember remember thinking, like, if I don't stay on track with all this stuff happening with educational technology, then I'm going to fall behind as a teacher and I'm going to lose my job. I remember, like, having that conversation with myself, or feeling like I will be a fraud if I don't know exactly, and I tried my best. But this checklist, I feel like now, really makes more sense to me. And if the tools fall within that, good. If they don't, okay. I mean, I saw this, I think I was out with my daughter, you know, instructions for fun. Here's how you blow into the kazoo. Have fun making your own melodies, you know. It's like, give the kid a kazoo, right? And, you know, Wallace even says again, great short stories and great jokes have a lot in common. Both depend on a certain quantity of information removed, but evoked by communication in such a way as to cause an explosion of associative connections. That's what we want. That's not being hosed. Having an explosion of associative connections in the classroom that you facilitate. Crane kicks. You know, so moving from the teacher provides the info to the teacher provides the info gap. And then the info. Right? Like, it's thinking about it more critically. And when I moved into that kind of model, where tangibly, all that means for me is they're doing the labs first. Okay? I get them more engaged in who they are. Like John Chan here, who now straps his iPhone to his head and takes first-person selfie videos every time we do a lab, right? When he had to follow a stepwise process, he didn't do stuff like that. Or before we started learning about electrons, I had my students play with the Makey, which is a great circuit device. And if you don't know about it, you should watch Jay Silver's TED Talk, Hack a Banana, Make a Keyboard. Not necessarily that related to learning about electrochemistry, okay? But I thought it would engage them in what electrons really were, right? And then in the middle of their activity, these kids started inventing a device where his brother with cerebral palsy could control his computer at home.
Now it's wired up really weirdly and crossing over a lot, so I'll move the fingers, So the mouse is in the middle of the screen. Yeah. And so the forefinger, it can move up, down, left, or right. The middle finger is down. Awesome. The ring finger is left.
Nice. So I mean, I think that's great and all, but the technology then allowed us to do some pretty cool stuff. We stalked Jay on Facebook, messaged him, and we told him that these kids invented some really cool thing that they were going to use at home, and Jay sent us back a video.
Thanks for sharing your controller for differently abled persons. Made me wonder what kind of interesting games you could play with that if you tried to play games without using your hands.
Now I thought this was fascinating that like this guy who's like this famous guy who has like the most successful Kickstarter campaign of all time sends us back this video, but the kids were like, Musallam, he's wearing the same sweater that he was in his TED Talk. So like in reflection, you know, I think that Lucy Kay says it best. Like we're kind of what we're sort of talking about.
So, you know, I'm trying to raise my kids, and I have one guiding philosophy, which is, it's an old saying that I renovated for my own purpose. It goes, give a man fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Leave the dude alone and he'll figure it out.
But then the question is like, what if they don't, right? Which they don't always. And I think that that is really the art of negotiating this tension between teaching and learning. Okay, is playing that. Jon Stewart, you know, just retired a little bit ago, and Terry Gross replayed his interview with him, and I loved a quote, stuck with me. He said, "It's through intense structure that I find the safety to be creative." And I thought it just gave me the chills when he said that. And I think that's what we're talking about. That's the art of it. You know, like inquiry learning or engaging kids isn't just letting them do whatever. It's so structured and so intentional and so awesome. So, you know, we teach from who we are, and I think that's the best that we can do. You know, so I'm going to try and be a delayed mentor. I'm trying to get my kids to do public crane kicks, and I'm going to ask for anonymous feedback, and I challenge you to think about what is your checklist as you go through your year this year. So there's the website with all the resources on it, and thank you very much for having me. I'll be happy to answer any questions.